Good morning. Welcome to our Leadership Matters conference, which is focused on diversity inclusion. What does diversity mean to you now?
When things go wrong for our staff or our patients and vice versa, it's about values and inclusion. It's about how you feel valued as a member of staff, and it's about whether you felt included to play your role or to contribute.
If we exclude people with protected characteristics, for example, from BME backgrounds or with disabilities, then we are simply putting barriers in the way of recruiting and developing the best talent from the widest pool.
What's worked well is having the senior team here, willing to be challenged, and I think that shows their openness and commitment to the subject.
We are all biased, all of us. So there's 7 billion people on the planet, and there are 7 billion people who have bias in some shape or form. There are no exceptions to this. Ironically, those people who have no bias are the most biased. So if I thought I had no bias, for example, why would I ever need to review a decision? Because I know I've treated everybody fairly. Why would I need to reflect on my behaviour?
The one thing I would share with colleagues about unconscious bias is that we all have it. It's there, it's unconscious, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
So unconscious bias, remember, is the biases we have that we're not even aware that we have. Things that all of us notice immediately, very quickly, are colour, gender, age, and whether somebody has a visible disability or not. We've all noticed. Noticing doesn't make us bad people.
Noticing differences means that you can value them. So my big learning from today is actually be open about noticing that people are different, but also value that and be open about it.
Untrained interviewers make up their minds about a candidate within the first few moments of meeting them. With training, interviewing is actually a very good technique. With untrained interviewers, you're better off actually choosing people at random. It's just as effective, it's quicker, and is 100% fair.
When Bina Candola said that people make the decision in the first few seconds, and particularly if they're untrained interviewers, I've always worked in human resources, I've always known that. But I don't know why, when he said it again, it just said to me, do we pay the attention to supporting people with their interview skills? Do we raise these questions enough?
The notion of associations is a key point to the work on unconscious bias, that we may be making associations, stereotyping people without even being aware that we're doing it. I was at Sainsbury's on Saturday behind the wheel of my car, and somebody's taking 10 goes to reverse into that bay, and I was thinking, oh, why don't you just give it to your husband? And then I drove past and I saw it was a man behind the wheel. And I thought, what sort of man are you?
Something that Bina said was that people like him, i.e. psychologists that work in the inclusion profession, sometimes don't reflect on their own practice and their own behaviours. So what I'm taking away from that particular segment is that I should always consistently review my own biases to make sure they don't impact on my practice.
The first thing to do is actually turn the mirror on ourselves. I think too often we're looking to blame somebody else for their prejudices.
A real big learning for me today was that let's hold a mirror up first before we start saying to other people, you're biased, actually, where's my bias?
And the second thing we can do is we can tell ourselves to stop. She said, how can you stop me having that reaction? I said, well, I can't stop you having that reaction, but you can decide how you work with that reaction. So if you go, you've got a tattoo on your face, you're an idiot, you're not getting a job. Or you go, you've got a tattoo on your face, I think you're an idiot. Now I'm going to try and do the best I can to give you as fair an interview as possible. It's not the reaction, it's the reaction to the reaction. We can decide how we react with that reaction. It takes a moment. People sometimes say, oh, diversity and inclusion, it takes too long, it's going to slow things down. A fraction of a second, that's all I'm asking.
You know, we will always notice the difference in each other, but it's about how you act on it. So for me, that was a really powerful lesson.
And then finally, there's a responsibility on all of us to talk about these things fairly, not to judge people, to try and discuss, to handle some of this tension in the workplace, not just brush it under the carpet. Because if we don't talk about it, it actually makes the bias worse. And it's not about reporting people to HR either, or to your diversity and inclusion people. It's about taking responsibility for dealing things as they happen in the moment.
So as you're doing an appraisal, as you're going through your recruitment process, thinking throughout that, what decisions am I making? Are they fair? Are they inclusive? Are they reflective of the kind of organisation we want to be?
And in order that we can build on the learning from Bina's session, we've pulled together a group of staff who are going to share with you their powerful stories.
I can't hear. Yeah, I'm deaf. I declared that I had a disability now on my form, on the job. Did anybody talk to me about it? No. Do I need anything? No.
I actually stepped in and did the talk on the menopause.
Hot sweats, just changed. I was shouting at the kids, never did that.
Because it does impact and it does make a difference.
I was allocated a desk, probably as far away from the rest of the team that I could possibly be. I've never felt so alone and isolated from everybody else. I couldn't communicate with anybody else because I couldn't hear them.
It's really about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, so thinking outside the box and thinking what it might be to have to live with whatever barrier or challenges that person lives with, and how we can best support that person to fulfil their opportunities within the workplace.
It doesn't mean, because I can't hear very well, that I can't do my job. It doesn't mean I can't be a nurse. It doesn't mean I can't do my job effectively.
So being back to work, you go to a new team, you're supposed to be organised, you're supposed to be the one that's in control, you need to do it all. No, you don't.
Our staff are important. If our staff are happy, then the patients receive a better care and treatment.
You really do need a really good team around you, and you need to open up and you need to be honest.
When we get patients that are admitted that are female and come in with mental health disorders, do we look at their physical health care as much as what we should? For me, I really thought I was going crazy, and that might be the same for our patients within the organisation.
I don't see it as an apprentice. I see this is my first job. I am doing something for myself. I've done this interview by myself. I've got here by myself.
I came out to my best friend at the time, who seemed to take it well. As regards the workplace, I found to have colleagues judge me for who I am and not what I am.
But people, if you say you're an apprentice, like, no, unqualified, doesn't have experience, they're just doing this to make up for some time, want some money, easy. No, that's not what we're doing it. We want experience. We want people to see us as adults as well.
The staff stories were really good, really powerful, really got people thinking and talking in the breaks.
It gets any easier as you get older.
I think it does. You know, you are quite, as a teenager, you're quite guarded, I think, anyway.
See the world as they're seeing it, feel it as they're feeling it, think about what they may be thinking about. And that's certainly been the most powerful experience for me today.
Some of you may recall, back in the day, you could go from house to house with your friends in all their houses, and they'll go to yours. When they came to my house, they would see my family there, my mum would welcome them, there'd be cooking going on. But you know something? I was never, ever invited into my white friend's home. So from a very early age, I understood where I was in the pecking order of British society.
Today was really inspirational for me. I heard a lot of stories from a lot of people and a lot of different stories. So it managed to broaden, my perspective on what I perceived diversity to be.
Within the process of about 12 hours, I had pretty much a full-on breakdown, where I'd gone into work and I just couldn't face doing the work, just one morning.
Everybody that comes to work has got their own story and their own experience of work that can affect them in very deep ways that they often can't deal with in the workplace. So it's just for organisations and managers and people to be mindful of that.
They've been off sick for a long period of time. They've received a letter from their manager saying, we'd like to invite you to a meeting to talk about your sickness, and immediately people's anxieties just go. In some cases people catastrophise, imagine the worst case scenario and then start believing it's true.
But it was really sort of interesting experience to be able to go through, to be able to impart some of the experiences that I've had in supporting staff throughout the organisation.
The managers and the trust are fantastic. They obviously had to do their job, but throughout it all, been very, very supportive.
Actually, sometimes as a manager, it's okay to ring somebody up and say, how are you?
Been back 2 years now. Love it, love the job.
And if you support people and you invest time and energy in making people supported back into work and being authentic in doing that, that person is far more likely to sustain their attendance and far more likely to come out the other side.
Sadly, I know what it's like to be bullied in the workplace. because of the colour of your skin. It makes you feel worn, weathered, humiliated and ashamed. In fact, when I was bullied, I felt like a black slave.
My favourite part was probably listening to Diana's story, the story sharing section, hearing something from a different background, completely different to what I've had and different from the experiences that I've had was really useful, and it did make me put myself in someone else's shoes.
And all the neighbours that were racist to me, the turnaround is, they want to talk to me now. So hopefully things have moved on and people have changed.
I think the power of stories and the power of that to bring things alive to people and to create a greater depth of understanding for people, and then hopefully using what I'd call that compelling narrative to create change. That's the big learning for me today. I have 3 stepsons who've been a part of my life since they were very young, and they are mixed race, white and Afro-Caribbean. And this has exposed me to some very different experiences. A simple example is when we take the youngest of the boys out for breakfast. That's one of his favourite things to do. But we've been there for breakfast and he just doesn't like it. He often comments he's the only black person in the restaurant. And he just doesn't feel comfortable. And so now if we're going there, he won't come with us.
I think it's just a personal, important step to understand that you can walk in somebody else's shoes, and if you do that, you may make yourself more aware about their stories, their perspectives, and that helps you as a leader.
We absolutely commit as an organisation to be a learning organisation. So that means we have to be receptive to new learning, and part of being today is exactly that.
As a Band 5 nurse with 25 years experience on a ward, if I've not had exposure to any development, or my manager doesn't even know my name or anything about me, I might feel a little bit disillusioned. I might feel resentment, and my performance will reduce. So that patient that might need that little bit of care at 3 minutes to 5 when I'm just about to finish and get my bus to go home, do you know what? I'll leave that for the other shift. Do you know why? Because no one bothers about me, so I'm going to work to rule. That's what can happen, and that's how our patients can suffer.
One of the conversations we had on our table was about we don't know enough about each other, and by just gleaning a little bit more personal information, we open up, we're much more honest, and it makes us more credible.
We have engaged people in this, I believe, today, and I think that we have to see this not as the destination, but this is the start of the journey.
The key learning that I'm taking away for today is, for me personally, I need to look at unconscious bias and reflect on myself and actually my behaviours.
But my personal pledge will be to try and recruit as many time to change champions across the organisation.
It's really important that we role model for those of us in senior positions, because I think that sets an example for others to follow.
Diversity inclusion should make a difference to the NHFT because it should make us better providers for patient services.
Our patient group and the general population that we work in are a diverse group of people, so our staff need to reflect that to be able to serve the local population.
But also it improves the experience for our staff, so it is really important that we make a difference for our patients and our staff.
It's also important because it's about driving innovation. People's ideas, different perspectives are about how innovation happens.
Just that energy of different points of view, the spark from people.
Well, if you care about your patients, you care about your working life, you care about people's well-being, then you have to care about diversity and inclusion. If you care about talent in your organisation, if you're concerned about making sure that we treat people fairly, if those are values that you hold, then diversity and inclusion is at the very heart of all of that.
So looking at the summary for NHS Northamptonshire,
I think what really resonated for me today was an understanding of, number one, we need to look at the evidence base and we need to own the evidence. And once we've owned the evidence about how well we're performing against equality, diversity, inclusion, having those challenging conversations, but actually looking to work together across the different staff groups to come up with solutions. So making sure that we involve each other in decisions, making sure that we're objective about it, and actually really challenging each other when it comes to some of the biases and the prejudices that sometimes fog our decision making within the organisation.
Thank you.